All right, thanks for coming, guys. Tonight we have Sherry here. She is an occupational therapist and therapeutic manager down at TLC Learning Center in Longmont. So she's going to talk to you guys for a little bit about her roles and about the center. There's room for questions, and then we'll talk some CUSOTA related items at the end.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. So, like Sierra said, I'm from TLC Learning Center. We're down in Longmont. And obviously, you can tell from our logo, we're pediatrics. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I got my start when I'm from New Orleans, and our family's best friends had a little baby with Down syndrome. And this was, well, I won't age myself. This was a long time ago. It could be like all your moms. And at that time, kids weren't really educated in their home community, so he was sent to a school in the city, and he was there during the week, and he only came home on weekends. And this is when he was little, and I remember him being 3 years old and coming home and just for the weekends to be with his family, and he'd have all these like exercises and things that he would do, and it was things that his OT from school was passing on. And I connected with him, and I loved doing it. So I had kind of from there forward, I got to do something with kids. So go forward and getting ready to go to college. And I was actually wanted to do genetic counseling. And then I did my freshman year of school, or my freshman year of college in Israel. And I had to do volunteer work. And my volunteer work was with, again, a mom who had adopted this little boy with Down syndrome. And I think he had a dual diagnosis of Down syndrome and CP. And I went in once a week, and the OT taught me how to feed him so mom could get some respite, because I was there as a respite provider once a week. So then I was like, oh, this is like really cool. I'm really liking this. Then I had a cousin there who, while I was in Israel for that year, she broke her hip and had a hip replacement. And so I got to see kind of that adult side of it. And I was like, well, that's cool. Not quite as cool as the other stuff I was doing, but still it was cool. So I went back to New Orleans afterwards and finished up kind of my prereqs. And then you didn't need a doctorate, or, I have a bachelor's in occupational therapy. So I just finished up and got my start there. I did an internship in Houston. It was my psychosocial one, and again, it was with pediatrics, and so that was fun for me because I knew I had this, like I wanted to go into peds. I did my physical disabilities in Tucson, and it was fun. It was educational, but I could tell it wasn't where I wanted to land, but that's where I met my husband, so that was a good thing. And then I did my last internship in San Diego, and it was peds and pediatric burn, and it was a really great internship. The burn part was really, for me, really hard, but went through with it. And then since then, all of my jobs have been pediatric. I did a little bit where, in the very beginning, 5 different, like a school district here and a school district here and a contract here, just trying to stay in pediatrics. And I'm there now for good. Like, don't ask me anything about adults because I can't tell you that. So that's a little bit about me. Thank you. So TLC, we're a nonprofit organization. We were started in 1956. So we've been in the Longmont community for a long time. We were started by a group of parents who had kids with therapeutic needs or special ed needs. And back in the 50s, it was the same thing like my little friend, who was like the 50s, but the same thing where you weren't educated in your home community. And so these parents said, that's not what we want for our kids. So the Tiny Tim Center, now TLC Learning Center, was started. If you fast forward many years, now we have our educational services and therapeutic services, and we're really a blended program. So through our educational services, we have preschool, toddler rooms, and infant rooms. And one of the things that's unique about our model is every classroom is an inclusive environment. So all of our infant and toddler rooms have 20% of the kids on enrollment have therapy needs, and in preschool it's 40% with therapy needs. And what that means is every classroom has an OT, PT, and an ST assigned to it. We do a medical model for our therapy in terms of that's how we bill, but they go in the classroom and they just hang out. And I know you've seen it firsthand. It's a beautiful model. It's not like, here's your 15 minutes of OT and then I have to go on to the next person. You can go in a classroom. If you have 3 kids, you're in there for 3 hours and you can just kind of bounce around and see them all. And you can do transitions and snack time and whatever you want with that. So that's part of our services that we have. So we see kids birth to 12. We contract with Imagine, which is the early intervention program for Boulder County. We're a licensed home care agency. You were asking me how my week was. We just got audited by our licensing, so I'm like busy writing up what I need to do to comply. One of our OTs is a certified yoga kids instructor, and that blends really nicely with OT. They talk about coordination and balance and self-regulation, so that all, it's in this after-school program. All of our kids that are in the preschool program get that as part of their curriculum. We have an OT that's certified in brain integration technique. And I have a little bit more about that later on in there. And then, and I'm the lactation counselor. So we have a little bit of everything. I don't know that I have enough of these, but if you want to just look and see a little bit about what brain integration technique is. Okay. So we already talked about that we use a medical model. This probably isn't as much for you guys. You can keep going. And we talked about this already, where we do our services. So one of the things, we are a unique center in that we do early intervention. So early intervention is in homes and natural environments. So other childcare centers, on the playground, at the park, whatever, in the library. We do them in our educational services programs. We do them at the center. And we also have the contract with 2 of the local, in Longmont, there's 2 hospitals, and we have the contract with their nurseries. So clearly, lactation counselor, that's the part that I like. I love going in the nursery. I'm assuming you guys know this now, what pediatric OT is, but it talks a little bit about providing the, we always talk about the jobs of living. Well, for kids, it's eating, playing. Some of my kids, it's sleeping, it's being able to sit in a car seat, it's things like that. And so this just talks a little bit about what we'll do for children. And again, just some of the different areas that we will treat as an OT. Keep going. And then this is a little bit about PT. And a lot of times, I can't stand when I hear, well, like the OTs are from the waist up and the PTs are from the waist down. That's not true. They do work more on mobility and standing, balance, and coordination. But I feel like all of us, OT, PT, and speech at a young level, we all overlap so much. You really have to have core stability for anything you do. So it's really, I think early on when you're seeing OTs and PTs together, and sometimes even speech therapists, you don't know who's who because we all just overlap so much. It's kind of your end result and it's your outcome that's going to be different. And these are a little bit more about just how physical therapy in pediatrics can help. And then speech therapy. Same thing. I don't know where you guys are in your education, but a lot of the kids we see have self-regulation and sensory integration or sensory processing disorders. So we spend a lot of time in that realm. We have 2 different, there's a spare one of that, if you want to look at those. So this one's just about sensory integration. Again, it's a lot of what we see. So it's the kids that can't sit still or they can't tune things out. While I was sitting here, I just read an email from one of our OTs. We've just started the listening program, and so it's auditory processing. And one of the little boys, who's very restricted eater through this program now, has slept through the night for 3 nights in a row, which he's never done in his life, and he's 5. And he ate 3 different kinds of foods in one sitting, which again is a really big deal for him. So our sensory systems, and this is the part, it's hard to explain to parents, it's hard to explain to teachers, physicians. It's a hard one. Insurance companies, it's really hard to get them to cover sensory-based occupational therapy, but it's probably, I mean, you really have to have that grounding in that system intact in order to do other things. So it's a really important part of what we do. This is just a little bit about how children with sensory issues might perceive things different. I would say, you know, in my practice, and I tend to see mostly kids with feeding issues, and then more multi-medical problems, so kids with cerebral palsy that were born very early and are, for the most part, nonverbal, non-mobile. But we're really working on things like, you know, like what do they eat and what's going to make them gag, and can you even have it in the room, or is that going to cause them to gag? I'm working with a little guy right now who we're working on learning how to spit so he can brush his teeth. We're working on just eating. When I met him, when he was, I believe he's about maybe 9 months old when I met him, and he's 3 now. He has a G tube. He had a TE fistula at birth, so his esophagus and stomach were not connected. They went to his lungs instead, which is not where you want your food to go. Very gaggy, couldn't tolerate any food, and now we eat lunch together every Wednesday and Friday. It's a lot of fun, and he always, shall we? Can I have this on your plate? So he always wants my food, but those are some of the things that we do. And this just talks a little bit about behavior. So we know that kids do things for a reason. And this is talking more about the sensory piece of it. So a child who hides under a table may be shutting out too much input, so they're more sensitive, or a child who crashes into people may be looking for more input because they're under responsive. And we do tours every week at our center. We had somebody come in this week, and it was a little boy that has gotten kicked out of 2 child care centers for just this kind of thing. Like a loud sound happens while he's lining up, and he turns around and he hits kids, and he just doesn't know how to react to that. He gets surprised, his whole nervous system gets jarred, and he's been labeled as bad and naughty, and that's what the mom and dad came in. I know it makes me very sad because he's not bad or naughty. He needs help organizing his sensory system. So this is a little bit about the brain integration technique, and I passed around that little flyer. It's not necessarily OT related. You don't have to be an OT, but the OT that we have that uses it really combines nicely with other, with traditional OT. It looks different though. It's, she has a massage table and it's acupressure points that she does with them. And it's looking at trying to increase blood flow. So it's a little bit more, it's not as easy to see, put it that way. That was that about our center, TLC. I know you had asked me to talk a little bit too about, I have a dual role there. So I'm a treating occupational therapist and I'm also the manager. I like that a lot because it means that whatever I ask my therapist to do, I'm doing it too. So all the notes, all the paperwork, all the whatever we have to do, I'm accountable and I do the same thing. At TLC, and I've only been a manager at TLC, so I don't know what it's like in other places, but I have to say we work really closely. I work really closely with the educational services manager and with our executive director. And so we meet once a week. We have really good communication about what's going on in the two programs and how they blend. Cindy, who's the director of education services, we sit down every week and we look at the class list and we look at how to have kids enter the classroom, how we might do transitions. We look at globally what are things that we need to change for everyone to be successful. We've adopted the Pyramid Plus approach, and I don't know if that's something that you guys have heard about. It is a social emotional approach for children birth to 5, and it's really OT, but for everyone. So we've adopted that at our center. So we have everyone go through that training. It's about 50 hours outside of it, but it's really social, emotional, and sensory training and how to bring that into the classroom and how to help everyone be successful. So we do that. That's part of what we do as a leadership and management team. I know you guys might be volunteering for us at some events. So we are a nonprofit. So we do some events to raise money. And that, again, it's in the manager role, I have like, almost like a toe in everything. So a little bit of that, try to bring sponsors. So my sponsors are like Hanger and, the New Motion. So wheelchair vendors, prosthetics, things like that. And then we always do something there where we try to bring back kids and have them talk, if not talk, then videotape and be a part of the celebration so people can see what we do in the community and how someone might have started with us when we have a little boy this year that's going to be coming that started with us when he was 6 months old and he just turned 18. And so looking at that continuum, and he's got 2 brothers that have come to the center since then, and just looking how that, continuing how it passes on from year to year. What questions do you guys have? Yeah.
I'm curious. You mentioned you were a lactation specialist. What's the OT role?
So I do feeding. I mean, that's my love is feeding and growth and nutrition. And so with some of the babies that come home from the hospital and moms want to nurse, or when I'm working in the hospital, it's looking at muscle tone's a big one. I mean, I have a lot of, parents that are like, I've nursed 3 kids before this, and then they end up with a preterm low tone baby and they don't know how to position the baby correctly. So really more where I come in, I'm probably not the best person if it's mom having an issue. I'm not as good with that, but I am better at positioning babies, trying to really think if you have a baby with a cleft palate, how could you possibly be successful nursing kids with visual impairments and auditory impairments, how to help them with that. And then, again, because of what I like to do, so kids with a lot of multiple medical issues, so cerebral palsy, tone is very different. So, in environment, I mean, that whole sensory system, if you have a kiddo that's already wired with they hear everything, how can you help them to focus on feeding? The big thing now, too, that I shouldn't say now, but it's identified more as being tongue-tied. And so, we're seeing kids with multiple types of tongue ties where they're in the front of their tongue, in the back. I just saw a little girl this week who had buccal ties. So she's had releases here under her tongue and the frenulum, the upper frenulum. So, but all that's been part of the lactation counselor training.
So at TLC, it sounds like the OTs do the feeding and things like that. Is that correct? Or is it kind of, because I know it's kind of it can go speech or it can go OT. Mm-hmm. So I was just wondering how that's divided.
So, I personally don't care who does it as long as you have background and you can do it. So, because that's what I like, I do it. And it seems like more of our OTs at TLC have that interest and want to do it. But there's definitely, even in the early intervention community and just in Longmont, there's speech therapists and OTs doing it. So it depends on your training.
And to piggyback off of that, they all have team meetings, so each therapist knows what each person is doing. So there's not necessarily, if someone's doing feeding with the kiddo, then both therapists aren't going to be doing it necessarily unless they're co-treating or something. But they all know what they're doing, so
yeah,
they don't do too much overlap.
So there's the team meetings within the educational services, and then we don't team as much with our older kids and our center-based kids. We do that more just kind of on the fly because, hey, you and me are both seeing this kiddo. But for our early intervention team, we also have another type of team meeting that we do on a monthly basis. It's called our transdisciplinary team. So that's been a big push in early intervention to have a primary provider service model. So I will tell you my opinion about it. It works for some, it doesn't work for others. So it's having one therapist go into the home and you cover everything. So I feel comfortable doing that up to a certain degree. I feel like if I'm going to be giving someone recommendations about speech and language, I want it to be something that is in my scope of practice, and that maybe I can Google and find out that information. But because I know, because of who I've been working with, that I know this. But I'm very careful about staying within my scope of practice, especially if I'm billing insurance. I can't write in a note that I'm working on communication and orthotics, but I can in that broader sense and through the early intervention programs. Yes.
How do you guys deal with billing for sensory integration? Like, how do you get reimbursed for that content?
So it depends, right? Everything. If a child has Medicaid, Medicaid's pretty good about it. It's pretty easy to bill sensory integration. But we also look at, the definitions and the coding for sensory integration and therapeutic activities. And a lot of things fit under therapeutic activities. So I would say we bill therapeutic activities most of the time. If you're teaching a parent a Bill Barger protocol, you can't really call it anything else. You have to call it sensory integration. But
do you bill the parents directly?
Like we bill through the insurance, and if the insurance denies it, usually at our center we just eat it. But if it is something where it's all sensory based, and we have had kids like that where you've done all the tests and there's nothing else, it's all sensory, we'll offer parents a self-pay rate because the insurance will deny it. So we have, that's part of being a nonprofit, is we do these events so we can have money for clients that can't afford it, or their insurance decides that you have Down syndrome, but in 20 visits you should be done with your therapy. So that's why we have that. And it's hard because you want to bill sensory integration because you want to legitimize it, but at the same time you don't want the parents to not get the service because they can't afford it. So it is a little bit of a balancing act, and I would say again we go back to therapeutic activities probably as much as we can. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering how or like what can I expect?
It was really hard for me. It was pediatric burns. It was kids that maybe their house was on fire and they ran through the flames to go get their blankie, and one little girl hugged her blankie and had a massive burn all through here. So I think compassion and probably really being creative, because it's painful what you're doing. And I don't know, I'll tell you that I had to, on that internship, I was supposed to go in to a surgery and do an airplane splint. And that's what they wanted me to do. So they prepped me to go into the surgery. I had all my supplies. I go in. They didn't tell me that I was going to have to be there for the graft. And I saw them start the graft and I hit the floor. So I don't know what happened after that. I think my supervisor made that little nifty splint. But it was, I will say that was hard. And in one of my jobs in Tucson, I worked in, we had a special care nursery, which was a more long-term nursery. So kids were there for, 6 months to a year. There were kids on ventilators. But we did developmental play, and we, got them walking around and doing whatever as much as we could. I loved that. I loved the NICU. I loved the center work and the early intervention. I personally had a harder time with rehab. Pediatric rehab was hard for me. So I think it just depends what your passion is, and for me that was harder. My daughter's she's a vet student. She loves to show me all the gross and gory stuff, and that's just not me. I don't want that.
Any other questions? Anything TLC related or OT related?
Question: how are assessment delegated? When they go in, is it separate sections, or?
We do it separate because we each bill individually, and then depending on, in early intervention, you have to use some sort of assessment at every IFSP meeting. So we use the HELP a lot because it's a little bit easier to sit back and not as invasive. You can ask parents questions. So we use the HELP. For our older kids, it depends. I have one little boy who is almost 10, and he's got a diagnosis of pervasive developmental delay. And they're always wanting me to, to score him and give him, and he scores horribly. And it's stressful for me, but we do the BOT. So we do that every year. I do the BOT and I do the PD. What the PD stands for, pediatrics. It looks at, what was that?
We're doing it right now.
Are you doing the PD?
It's due tomorrow. None of us have started.
It's for me, that's been a good one for some of my kids that are either, maybe use a walker for something, and I'm not expecting them to be independent. Like, I know they're never going to make some of the skills on other gross motor and fine motor tests. It's a good one to use. I have a little girl right now who she uses a walker or crutches, and she doesn't eat orally. She's verbal as could be, has a little dysarthria, but very weak, and the PD's been a really good test to look at, like, what can she do more independently over time without looking, because if I did a standardized test, she'd be like at the 2-year level, but she's really not. It's just looking at the quality of her movement. So I like that. I like that test. You were asking about, like, how do you bill for sensory too? So with this particular boy, every year the insurance comes back and they give me a little feedback and say, could you please just treat the motor delay? And I'm like, no, I can't. He's got so much anxiety. And when we do the testing, he's like looking over my shoulder. And I mean, I can't use the stop timer because he wants to see it. So I have to, like, very slyly do it. And he's got so much test anxiety and I hate it. But I've been, well, I believe his do, but his insurance feels like it doesn't. So I've been told not to do that. So I do it anyway. I'm just careful about how I word it in my notes.
Thank you, Sherry, for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know if you want these or are interested, but this one is about our services. So it's kind of a little bit what was on the PowerPoint. And this one is about the educational services. I got poppers. Anyone want a popper?
What's a popper?
For your phone?
Oh, yeah.
It is. It's TLC.
Okay, if you're watching online, we're gonna switch gears. Maybe.
That's fun. Thanks. Yeah.
Did you say what does it do?
It's cute.
Oh.
No, I have one. I couldn't live without it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do. You're fine. Are you done? No, I'm not. Okay, I'll just pick it up.
Thank you.
You guys do want all Sarah, do you want one?
Yes.
Here, take two.
That's so cute. Thanks for coming in.
You're welcome. I hope that helped.
Yes, that's nice. We'll see you probably soon around. Oh yeah, I emailed Cindy and Matt about doing some generation thing.
You could also
Yeah, we tried. I thought we passed.
add
it
these
on
in
to
here.
the coordinator.
Okay,
I'll follow up. on that.
that's okay.
No, I can follow up. It's coming up. So is that what you wanted? Okay.
You're more than welcome to come and student stuff. So I'll be in TLC soon though. So.
Okay.
Who's G unit, Cam?
I think she died.
cute.
Okay, we are going to get started on the CUSOTA related things. Okay, so just as a friendly reminder, for Dean's reimbursement, you guys need 8 volunteer hours. I think most everyone paid the membership dues, and if you're unsure if you did it by October, you can always email me. And you also need 6 out of 10 meetings. Thanks, Sherry.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you too. And the meetings count if you come in person or if you come online. And if you guys ever have questions of where you stand, just shoot me an email and I can let you know. And then honors courts are 15 volunteer hours, and they are $5, and you can pay them by sometime in the spring. They haven't told me exactly when yet, but sometime in the spring. And then for, well,
It's powered right there.
it doesn't want to move. I'm so short.
Hold on.
Well, I think we just have to wait for it to stop blinking before we turn it on again. That's what we did last time.
I'm in a hurry.
Too hot?
This time it was like,
No, because I've never seen it do
If you're watching online, we're having technical difficulties. Hold on.
you can try and press the power of the volume.
I think seats. So you have to have these on.
That's what that meant.
Yeah. If it like gets to a steady red, then I can turn it back on.
You guys want to look at it on my laptop? Do you need to look at it? Do you want?
I feel like if you just.
I'll talk slow. I'll announce
Or you
it.
email it to
I'll email it to you too. Do you want to look at my laptop here? No? Okay.
Got it.
Okay. Well, for volunteer events, I'm all over the place now. So we have the Rise Dance coming up. It's the 16th, and this will all be in an email. So check your email. But it's the 16th, and we'll probably get there around 6 or 6:30, and then it'll go till 9:30 just for cleanup. And then also for decorations and game making, we'll set a date probably next week or maybe the week after. I'm not sure yet. And we'll email that out
And
to you
times
guys.
are to be determined, so make sure you check your email like a week before, just so you don't get there too early or too late, because times kind of change. These are like tentative times.
And then we also have Pizzabilities every Friday. That one is 9 to 12. And then we have the Denver Rescue Mission and the Lakewood Recreation. Those are events that if you are worried about volunteer hours or you need more or want more, you can sign up for those yourself and then just let me know or Sydney know that you did them. And then just so you guys know, we need record of your volunteer hours so for Dean's reimbursement. So make sure that it's being communicated with us. If you guys are at an event like the last one we just had, we take attendance when you're there, so we record them for you, obviously. And if you guys have any pictures of different volunteer events you do, send them to me so I can send them off to campus and maybe to you guys if you want to see them. And then, thank you. So our next meeting will be November 28th, and this is in an email as well. Let's see, I'm out of order. Okay, and then we had nominations for secretary, and we had a super close tie, but thank you. Emily Holmeyer is the new secretary. And so I have, this is all sent in an email, sorry I keep repeating myself, but I'm gonna have you guys send her your phone number. You can either email it to her or text it to her. That way we can coordinate volunteer events the day of then, just so if there's, I don't know, time change, you guys don't have directions, whatever it is, you have our numbers and we have yours. Okay, and I don't know why this is so out of order, sorry. But our next meeting, we have Cindy Clark, who is coming in to talk about, they use different modalities and different techniques in therapy. So she's gonna come in and talk about the ones that they do. I think, so they do infant massage, craniosacral therapy, and then some other non-traditional ones. And it will be in this room again from 4:30 to 5:20 on November 28th, which is a Wednesday. This was the only one that was a Tuesday. And if you are watching online, email dance to Sydney for attendance. If you have questions, let us know. I went through that really fast. Do you guys have questions? No, nada. Cool.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I think you guys are doing a great job getting tested.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Like they're really
Tell her. That's good. Thank you. I know it's a lot of pediatric. For some reason, they were like the only ones that responded. So next semester, we'll try and have more that aren't pediatric. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And if you guys ever have an area of interest and you're really interested in learning about something, this is a great opportunity to do it. So I'd love to get someone in the area for you guys to listen to what they do. Any other comments or questions or anything?
You're doing a great job, Sierra.
You guys are all doing a great job. Thank you guys for coming.
Sierra's the
That's
best.
awkward. Wow. And thank you guys for coming. It really makes it, when the speakers come, they love having an audience. Last year, there was only a couple people that would come. That's true. That's true. So thank you. You're dismissed. Bye.
Did you guys all get